Joining me today are three experts in online video and hopefully cloud video workflows. I'm going to introduce them one by one and ask each one to say just a little bit about themselves and their business. By the way, I'm Troy Dreyer. I'm the Senior Associate Editor for streamingmedia.com. You've been to our conference, and I hope you'll visit our website every day for the latest in online video industry news. First up, we have Suze Kopp, who is the Content and Community Producer for the MIT Enterprise Forum. Suze, tell us about yourself.
I'm Suze, and I work at the MIT Enterprise Forum. My job is working. We have a global network of 28 technology entrepreneur chapters around the world. So Russia, Israel, San Francisco, all over the world. And one of my projects is building a video portal so that we can connect all of our chapters into one hub, so they all can share their videos. We produce all the chapters combined produce over 400 events every year. So we have all this great content. A lot of times it's very isolated to that region. So with the video portal, we're creating a space where they can share their videos, so that an entrepreneur in Russia who has this really great idea might be able to connect with an investor in San Francisco more easily, getting these ideas out there and promoting commercialization of technology. So I'm working with the Vidcaster team out in San Francisco. We're building the portal. If you'd like to take a look at it, it's in beta mode right now. It's video.mitef.org. So that's my main project right now with the Enterprise Forum.
Next up, we have Finbar O'Hanlon, founder of Linnaeus. Linnaeus, is it pronounced? Linnaeus, it's pronounced. Tell us about yourself and what is Linnaeus?
I'm Finbar O'Hanlon. I've spent the last 15 years building, working, and commercializing technology systems based around video distribution. Most of it online. I've worked in the creation side, from the video post to the actual distribution end of it. I built a platform called Linnaeus, which is around the assembly of sample information that sits inside video. We treat video as this big, heavy thing that costs a lot to process and costs a lot to transport and push and transcode. I look at inside the video, say the ISO-based linear file format, look at the actual samples, and look to build more of an index that points to samples inside files that then reassembles the samples to provide one unique linear video stream. So rather than processing a new piece of video, it's just an index to points inside samples of other video files, regardless of format. So I'm about trying to make even simpler than it is. So a file can be shared in a 40K container to millions of users. That could be 10 hours worth of content, including advertising from any content owner at origin, rather than actually being stored in one central location. So it's about connecting the world without actually creating all the bottlenecks. It's trying to unlock it. So that's what Linnaeus is. That sort of makes sense.
Thank you. I guess you could all guess what that was about, but you have to wait till the end. Next up, if you've been to one of our conferences before, you've seen Michael Dunn. He's one of our regulars and one of our favorite panelists. He's the Chief Technical Officer for Hearst Interactive Media. Michael, tell us about your work.
Sure. Interactive media is one of the divisions within Hearst. We're a diversified media company, so we have newspapers, magazines, traditional TV stations, cable channels, B2B businesses, and then I'm also part of our venture group, so we invest in startups, and once they become part of our portfolio, then I work with them from a technologist to technologist or product manager perspective. I'm on the customer advisory board of Brightcove. They're one of our investments. And then we use Brightcove along with Kaltura as our OVP for some of our properties. And I'll get into that as we go forward. I'm mostly working on emerging and disruptive technologies and how they affect a media company or the media industry. A lot of also work in the semantic web side of things, so where metadata is going and how that's going to be used by media companies.
Terrific. All right, let's jump into it. These people want specifics about cloud video workflows and how it can improve their offices, their environments. Let's just start out with the very basics. I'm just going to toss it out and ask you guys to do the heavy lifting. What does it mean to have your video in a cloud workflow? What does that mean, from what we're doing now? How is it different?
Well, it means you're editing on. I mean, the cloud is the internet, so you're editing online. as opposed to just locally to your computer, to your hard drive.
Yeah, it's using computing resources. It's simplifying a process. So if you look at in the past where you had a transcoding system here and you had a distribution system here or a post system here, it's using a series of resources in a centralized online location to actually produce or effectively make that process a lot simpler. So, and by utilizing that distributed cloud network, whether it's a private cloud or a public cloud.
And can you say why a person would want to move their workflow into the cloud? What advantages does that have of doing it
Cost
locally?
effectiveness, simplicity. A lot of people who are content producers aren't necessarily people who understand how to distribute or monetize content or aren't technologists. So, my mentor is the managing MD of one of the largest TV producers in the world, and, they have challenges where they produce content for the BBC and the same show for an Australian network. The time and programming of that varies. So there's constant sort of issues in terms of, okay, well, how do we get this large format to be, rather than editing files all the time and spending the time producing it, to push it into to millions of users in different handsets. They're not the specialists of that. They're just the specialists of creating content. So I presume there's a lot of content owners here. They specialize in creating content, not actually understanding all the semantics of delivering it. So the cloud can be a single source with a provider who understands that sort of. So they can drop one file and there's file in, and the cloud can actually, or the provider can actually make those segmented profiles for it.
So it sounds like it really removes a lot of the technical headaches.
Totally, yeah.
You just upload it and you let the experts do it.
With the provider, the cloud doesn't do it. A cloud
Right.
provider would simplify that process for you. Yeah.
Sure. You get it as someone you trust, someone that knows what they're doing, and they streamline it and take care of it.
I think the key thing is understanding what your business is and what you want the cloud to do. A lot of people have a finished file and say, I just want that finished file to be then played in X amount of profiles. But there's collaborative processes. If you're a broadcaster, it's a different sort of scenario. So it really depends on what you see the cloud to be. You've got to understand your business and what you're trying to do with it, and to understand what provider is best for you. But it does simplify the process.
Are there types of cloud video workflows? Are there different types or systems?
Yeah, we've got like Avid Interplay that runs off an ISIS, which is for more of a broadcast where you have collaborative processing for E&G news groups. You have, and then you've got providers out there that you can just like Vidcaster, you can just get them to basically do everything. You can give them a file and say, look, I want to produce like X, Y, and Z. That's probably how you're doing your system.
Right. I mean, the Enterprise Forum has chapters around the world, so having it in the cloud means it's so much easier for them to access. It's access management, user rights management. It's so much easier to have one place that everyone can go to upload their video. And there's, of course, the editing side, which we haven't really gotten into yet. But it's so much easier than having each of these 28 chapters all over the world individually working on something on their computer or on their own little channel on YouTube, and having just one place where they can collaborate and work together.
So how much of the operations do you guys put in the cloud? I mean, you edit locally and then you upload?
Yeah, right now we're focused on the upload, the site where you view it. But it's also part of that workflow is we're uploading the large files. So it's not that it's just like a web-friendly size. It's up to 5 gigs of a video, a HD video. So so where it's stored with our Vidcaster site, that's also part of the workflow in terms of we don't have to have all of these files necessarily on one computer, or that's the place where we're archiving as well.
So is archiving the main thing, or do you use it also for transcoding, distributing?
It's all of the above, yeah.
All of the above,
exactly.
and Vidcaster provides all of that.
Yes. And they're in the back in the yellow shirts, so they can correct me if I make it wrong. But
you raise those hands. No, we don't do that. Michael, what is Hearst doing? Who are they using? Do you have a provider?
Yeah, we have a couple different ways to do it. I mean, the cloud decision is the same decision you use for any application. And for video, you're going to use the CDN. That's the only smart way to put heavy assets up online. So really, the OVP is the choice you make front-ending into that CDN. So for us, we use Brightcove, and we use that for everything. That's an all-in-one OVP, online video platform, for those who don't use that acronym. And then on our TV stations, we use Kaltera because we only wanted a part of the workflow We integrate with a CMS that's a SaaS CMS, and did that, moved away from a flow framework, which is sort of a roll your own framework that we used for originally for our TV stations. I think talking about cloud workflow and just sort of your decision process, for a big media company that's very diverse, somewhat dysfunctional, one group will want to do one thing, one group will want to do another. When you do a deal with a big OVP, you're creating standards, you're creating best practice, you're learning from one group across into another group, and it's easier to sort of enforce or ensure that you're going to do the best things you can with your video. And again, as you maybe learn one ad opportunity or some improvement in performance, you can share that across the various groups that you have. So standards and economics. Originally, especially when Flash first came out, there was a lot of complexity around how to get online video to perform efficiently. And so if you could go to a service provider that had that expertise, we produce content. That's what we know how to do. We have technologists, we have developers, but they're not keeping up with the ebb and flow of what's going on within the highest level of performance within the online video industry. And having a provider like a Brightcove or someone like Kaltura who does that for you is just a huge benefit. They get the benefit of doing it for multi-tenant, so they do it for thousands of customers versus just having a core team within your business that does it just for you. You'll probably do it okay, but in our experience, it's just better when you have that experience spread across thousands of customers and taking a multi-tenant approach. That's the normal way to judge cloud anyways. This just happens to be for video.
So once again, it sounds like it's a real headache remover. So many things you don't have to pay attention to if you have a trusted partner.
Yep, I agree.
Now, we had touched on how there's different types of cloud video workflow solutions. Can we address maybe the benefits of each, or for someone looking to make a purchasing decision, why they would go for one type over another?
I can talk about the two we have relationships with, and,
okay.
and we've looked at others that were out there, but obviously we're a little biased. We have an investment in one of them. So for Brightcove, it was fairly straightforward, and we got involved with them fairly early. They pretty much were the ones that coined the acronym OBP, or were at the very beginning. And we just wanted an all-inclusive platform that we could grow with and could do everything we needed, from ad integration, from integrating with affiliate partners, from standardizing our players, from analytics, and just as we did some experimenting in our newspaper group with UGC. So early on, Brightcove was able to accommodate that with us as well. So that's sort of the all-included OVP that you can pretty much rely on them to do every aspect. You create the content, upload it, and then create renditions from that and go forward with your publishing model. With Kaltura, that's more recent, and they're an open source framework. It's more of a framework approach, or almost a platform as a service. And we had specific integrations that we wanted to do. So there's a core development team that's responsible for integrating all of the aspects of content production, not just video production. And so they served as a platform as a service to integrate into a SaaS-based content management system that we have, and have other integrations. They do their own integration with Akamai. Akamai is our CDN, by the way, across all of the properties that we have. And then there were some other ad network integrations that they wanted to be able to do. So that's just an aspect of the whole versus the whole thing that Brightcove does.
I think, too, with some of the different models, depending on, as a content producer, often people don't know what they want. So it's often, people say, well, look, I'm not interested in having an ad serving capability because it's not my business model. We're not in that thing. We're not going to get advertising. But to go with a provider who has the scalability or the flexibility to actually provide some of these different services, you'd be surprised if you do have sticky content, how that can be syndicated. I work with a group in Australia who is youth-driven content, and they've done 5 years of footage, which is just online, and it's been on their own site. Really hasn't done a lot of stuff. And now it's starting to be picked up and aggregated throughout the world. Now, they've only have really one file there, and it needs to be now delivered into multiple different formats, and there needs to be advertising on that. So it's if you as a content owner, you think, look, this is where we want to go as a business, and we want to choose this OVP or this cloud provider to do this service for us. Often having a limited scale, it's in my view, it's good to have a partner who has the flexibility to be able to expand if your business expands. Mm-hmm. If you choose someone just to do one specific job or a platform that just does one or two things, it might be a little bit tricky down the track because you might have to start replicating things. Mm-hmm. So it's better to think larger in my mind.
And for us, it was really important for us to have an agnostic player. So we have a chapter in New York who's using Kaltura through the MIT Tech TV. Another chapter is using, really using Vimeo. Another chapter is using YouTube. Some of them are using all of them. And with our video portal, it doesn't matter. Like it's agnostic. It can plug in Brightcove videos, Kaltura videos, all of the major videos. Everything, all of those will work. So we're not bound to just using one or the other. We can use all of those.
I think that's key. As a content producer, you just want to produce content. You want to do what you do well, and you want a partner who can give you the greatest reach and frequency and the greatest amount of flexibility, rather than the most limited amount. Rather than just thinking cost-wise. That's the way I look at it.
Is large files a sticking point with cloud workflows? It seems like that's always the big hurdle when working with video in the cloud. Yeah.
And maximum file size, basically, or.
Well, I mean, just the time that it takes and the bandwidth cost of distributing large files. Has that been an issue for you guys?
No.
No. So, breaking news, you put up a lower weight asset to begin with to get it up in a less optimized rendition just to get it up, and then you backfill it with something that's a higher res asset as you go forward. Mm-hmm. With entertainment, you sort of have that in your workflow that you just, you're going to produce it, you're going to upload it, and you're going to have a time when you launch. So it's less of an issue. I think early days of OVP, just the connectivity in ancillary offices was a problem. That's our problem. Making sure you have enough bandwidth to upload on the upload side to be able to get it into the environment. And again, all of our assets sit inside Akamai, so it's already optimized at that point. It's as you go through the workflow of uploading your video, creating all the renditions, and then being able to have it available for the various sites that you're going to publish it to. But if you've sourced your bandwidth in each of your locations properly, you should be okay.
Okay. I know you all are veterans of working in the cloud and with video. Let's toss out a few best practices. Maybe each of you could give us a couple for the audience. Do's and don'ts that you have learned along the way that they can benefit from. And remember, the don'ts are always more fun because people love to learn from mistakes. Suze, you want to start off?
Well, I know with the Enterprise Forum, all of our chapters are really focused on events. So they'll have an event that's an hour and a half long and do a video of that. It's really not realistic to put up a full hour and a half video. I mean, often people will not sit through that. But I mean, there are of course tools that make that a little more easier, like the interactive. Now I'm forgetting what it's called, but the interactive transcript, so you can find the place in the video that you're interested in. But I try to encourage people to break out their videos so that it's not just one long video that they have to wade through. So that's I guess one of my tips.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, taking on from what Sue says, it's you see shows like LA Inc. and Ice Road Truckers, and you think that that's just the show because you don't really think about it, and it's not wild footage. You just go and shoot a truck going down an ice road. That's not a TV. It's not a show formatted for TV. So there is a difference between just shooting something and sticking it online and hoping people are going to watch it and making something that's actually a compelling viewing experience. So if you're going to put things online and you want brand exposure and you want it to be sticky content, you've got to make it sticky content as content producer. But that's what you specialize in, I suppose. So one of the things that I've learned with some people is like Suze is, here is just all this stuff, and the expectation is lots of people are going to look at it, and then they don't. Secondarily is with text, people putting text on video and then trying to put it on handsets. And it's all compressed and you can't see anything, It's thinking about the actual viewing display device before you actually start putting things like There's no point putting subtitles on a cell phone, isn't it? You're not going to see it. It's that sort of thing,
Mm-hmm. Michael?
So I'll go more fundamental. Don't ignore the metadata. So there's metadata that's produced systemically at Capture. There's metadata that's produced by or known by the content creator, and there's metadata at each step of the workflow. So you may have marketing-based metadata, you may have ad metadata, the content syndication partners. There's going to be these metadata opportunities, and what we've seen in the past is people get rushed for time, and so they ignore it. The future of the web, especially as we move to HTML5, is metadata rich. So just content publishing, discovery, whether it's search, social, or syndication partnerships, and then the monetization is all going to depend on the richness of your metadata. And video especially, it's a highly monetizable video if you do it right, but it's a blob. It's an encapsulated asset that you have to define what's in it, or you have to run some process against it to determine what's in it. So for us, that time spent and dedication to making sure that you're properly tagging and creating metadata around your video is just critical.
I think another really important point on that for the future of search within video is to make sure you keep your EDLs on. So when you're outputting your master file, keeping your XML EDLs and just storing them, because the future of not only the actual content-rich metadata of to capture all of the sociability and that functionality is also the functionality within inside the actual video stream. So later on, to be able to have that where you've captured a file in a disk and you've ingested and said, okay, well, there's my EDL. I believe in the future that's going to be very valuable metadata.
That's what I call systemic metadata. It's being produced by the process versus the creator has their own metadata they're going to add to it that defines it.
Can we do another round of best practices? I love the practical advice.
I think it's also important, I mean, just based on my own experience, is to choose tools that give you the most control, which might seem obvious, but in terms of being player agnostic, user rights management. I mean, I'm working with 28 chapters around the world, and each of those chapters needs to be able to upload their videos, but they don't have access to another chapter's videos. We also have working on a feature where they can highlight the other chapter's videos on their page if they want to share it. But just overall, being able to have control is really important. Of not being restricted to a certain type of player, and also being able to give the kind of access that you need to be able to give to your users is really important. I mean, you may not be working with 20 chapters around the world, but you might have multiple offices, or it's just really important to be able to have the control that you need.
I think another thing that I've learned is if you're running multiple sources for the feeds of video, is making sure everyone is recording at the same frame rate, same audio sample rate, same frame size. As you get people doing totally different sort of aspect ratios, totally different and running NTSC or PAL, and then they're transcoding it down at different. It's good to have a standard and start from that standard and instantiate that through all the different content producers, so everyone knows what they're producing and the size. So you've got one set of material which is not going to be problematic when it actually starts coming together.
So when judging your service provider, your OVP, check out their support forums, the blogs they have. If they have developers blogging, that's always a good thing. And you're going to use that for your training for your employees as you onboard them or as they're working with it. Kaltura has it's an open source platform, so it has a good community behind it. Brightcove has very rich best practices and support forums. And a lot of times you can get the information for your staff that's working at the core of the workflow off of those environments. And again, it's coming from multi-tenants. So, if we see one thing in something we've done and that propagates up into a support article, that just ends up, helping eliminate problems before you get into them. But look at what the OVP has to provide in advance when you're making that decision.
So the workflow that we have now has really evolved, right? Are there milestones that we can look at and how it's evolved?
Well, yeah, you've gone from, buying a separate machine in your office, just trying to do transcoding and waiting overnight for it to work, come back in the morning and it hasn't even worked, or to now just uploading a file and someone managing all the profiles for you and actually delivering it to every device. So it's gone from this long, arduous process that at best sometimes worked and cost a lot of money and had dedicated machines to now just a single upload. You know?
So what other solutions or problems does a cloud workflow solve? Like,
The propagation of devices as you're moving towards, we're going from IPv4 to IPv6. There's going to be more and more end nodes out there that want to consume video. So being able to do that in the cloud with a provider that's doing this for multiple people, I think is really helpful. I think another milestone is going away. We're not there yet, but going away from proprietary requirements to more open requirements and browser capabilities via HTML5 is very useful. The less we have to depend upon proprietary solutions, just the easier it's going to be to flow across all those devices.
So you talked about screens. Does having a good provider mean that you don't have to worry about devices or screen sizes? Does it mean that you can just take that off and you'll stream to anyone?
Yeah. And that's the whole point of picking a good one.
Yeah, they have to. I mean, you still have to worry about it. When you're thinking about design, you have to design for a certain type, screen. If you're aiming at this, you're aiming at an Android device, or you're aiming at something that's on the front of your refrigerator. That's a design issue. Making sure you've, again, tagged or metadata enabled all your content so you know what goes where and why. That's a design element. So making sure the provider can keep up with that. At the end of the day, it's a template. So you're just fitting a template to whatever the device requirements are and what the capabilities are. Having uniformity across your player helps a lot, or knowing what you'll have in one device versus what you won't have in another device. Your provider should be able to work with you.
And as content owners, that's why you pick a good provider. They specialize in keeping up to date with that stuff. That's their gig. Just as you're as a content provider, that's your gig, is to make your content and understand who you're trying to talk to and how you sell that message. Your provider should be its job to actually understand the new emerging technologies and making sure they're adapting to that. So having best practice, as we're talking forum, someone who has that experience is vital.
Well, how does cost compare? I mean, you do it in-house, you pay once, right? You get your equipment and you're done. But with a cloud, aren't you always paying?
Well, the cost isn't just buying the equipment. There's the resources, the time, there's a whole extra.
If you do it in-house, you deal with technological obsolescence. And you're having to staff for that. And again, you're doing it for yourself. If you do it with a content provider, that's, you're factoring that in. You do move away from capital and expense to just pure expense. So there's, from a financial standpoint, you're shifting how you're doing things. They're dealing with technical obsolescence. You're not. The service provider is. So there's cost benefit to all of them. I think you can compare, all of the OVPs and where their cost models are. The one thing I would caution against is there's a history of OVPs underbidding other OVPs, and then you end up getting a really crappy service. So just make sure you talk to other customers and figure out what they've experienced. Some of those OVPs go away, so you sort of see that. But making sure you're not getting underbid on something. I prefer going forward with something that is reasonably priced, but you're going to get the functionality and the SLAs that you're looking for. And then you're not in a scenario where you're just going a procurement route where you're just sourcing it to the lowest bidder, because I do believe you get what you pay for.
Have you found the cost to be less for the cloud, same, more?
We've been using SaaS-based solutions for quite a long time, so it's very cost beneficial, and we'd have to go way back to compare when we did a lot of things in-house. And that technical obsolescence, constantly having to keep up with technology churn, ended up costing a lot, and we had to staff to just that. This is sort of just satisfying these requirements is sort of mundane technology. So you want to be able to have your technologists focused on creating content, supporting the groups that create content, and where your revenue streams are, not fundamental infrastructure, which is at the end of the day what this is.
Finbar, how do you think costs compare?
Well, I see both ends. I see the broadcast sort of side of the people that have been shifting over the last 5 years, and I still see a lot of the stagnant practices. But then I see people who have never been able to find an audience before and are just the first time going, well, I've now got a chance to be able to get my stuff to an audience. I've worked with groups across Germany and Spain and England, and these are associations with massive fan bases that have never been able to get an audience before, primarily because the cost of processing that content is so great that a TV network would never take that on. Because their issue is, well, why would I pay for all this content from, let's say, this touring car championship in this particular country when I can, it costs so much money to put it into my network. Same thing was before when an organisation like, say, Red Bull, who shoots all these events, for them to go and purpose this, push it online, the cost of doing that all in-house is so great and took so much time and resources. It's like, pushing it into a cloud gives it this facility which has then don't forget, that's not the bit that makes the discovery, that's the bit that actually pushes it out and gets it into the right formats to deliver. Then when we talk about the metadata, it's then this comes the problem of how do you get discovered and making it content rich and how does it come into the network. But from a cost point of view, absolutely it comes down. And cost can't just be measured by, I've bought a machine. Mm-hmm. There's so many more costs involved. And there's a lot more failure. When you don't know what you're doing and you're trying to transcode something or get it ready to push up, the amount of times that it takes you to run things through to get it right. Buying the experience, it's like buying the experience of someone, a professional, to do a job. You can go and nail in a wall, but you get a pro to do it in 5 minutes, and you might end up taking 2 hours. So what's that time worth? Mm-hmm. I guess it's people have to look at that in an organisation and evaluate that. Personally, I think it's massively reduced cost.
Massive. Does it remove technology barriers to put your workflow in the cloud?
Massively.
What kind of barriers?
Well, the knowledge of how do I get this file to play on that, and that, and that, and how do I make sure it's protected, and who's managing that, and where do I get the metrics that it played here, and it was people. How do you get that skill set? Do you want to skill up and do that, or so I believe it's.
What about working with partners? Is that easier with one system?
Well, we live in a world where there's really no standards. HTML5 is coming up as a standard. We have the ISO-based media file format, but we have no standard bitrate, no standard player, no standard codec. But we've got people that it's getting better. The world's getting better. It's collaborating with people. This is why I said before, when you have partners, you want to actually start to decide, if you can have the opportunity to pick a format that you're going to work within, whether it's a particular runtime or a particular file format. But it's collaboration. I think the cloud, it definitely is a better place to collaborate from, because now you've got ad insertion partners who can start monetizing your content. You start doing it yourself in your own special format. How are you going to do that? That's why having a partner who understands that gives this not just collaboration from ad partners, but from like exactly what you're doing, Suze.
Yeah, I mean, I work at a nonprofit, so you don't need to be like a mega media company in 2012 to create an amazing video site and get your content out there, which is good for us because we have a modest budget. But it's definitely so much easier now than it used to be. Definitely.
What do you think about this? One of my good friends, Bam Margera from Jackass, he's made an absolute Monty out of shooting just content of just him and his mates having fun. It's taken him a lot of years to do it. But there is a typical example of someone who makes his own content and has evolved his content into the right partners and the right channels. So he hasn't just done it himself on a website. He's used best practice but he's had sticky, tangible content. But it just shows that we live in an age where people who have sticky content that people want to watch do have a facility now to actually distribute that and get that seen. And the cloud is the perfect vehicle to do that.
You were telling me before the panel that you thought Dash would have an impact in cloud video workflows, a possible move to MPEG Dash?
Well, look, I think there's fragmentation of video is, I think, a real key thing to the reassembly of video. If you have a 10-hour piece of video, as Suze was saying, and you want to do a highlights package of that, why go and make another piece of video? In the past, we've gone into an edit suite and made another version of that video, then put that up, and then made different profiles on that. Mm-hmm. For every iteration of the video, there's a new section of video that's made. So it's more storage, more profiles, more transcoding. To be able to have one file that is referenced into or having fragments of that actually can be selected. I think it's part of the next generation, personally.
At this point, I'm going to turn the questions over to the audience. Hopefully you guys are looking for some video cloud workflow answers, and maybe not. Anyone have a question for? Yes.
Yeah, Michael, you were talking about your workflow and you mentioned prototype software and advertising. Can you speak to the exact workflow that you
Okay, the question was about your workflow at Hearst, a specific workflow working with Brightcove.
How much detail do you want? I mean, it's the normal, huh? A little more detail. Well, let's see. We have stringers that capture video, so they're capturing mobile video. If they're in the newspapers, let's say, we sit down in the studio. If we're in the magazine side, or on the broadcast TV side, it's shot in the live reporters that are out in the field that work for us, and they're uploading a variety of different ways to upload. Sometimes if they're out in the field, they're going to upload into something like as simple as Dropbox or Box, and that's going to get back to a central location where they're going to have a managing editor that's going to look at it and decide if it goes unedited or if it's breaking news, it may go unedited, or is it going to be edited in the suite. If it's in broadcast, they have suites. If it's in magazines or newspapers, they have editing bays that they can take advantage of. So that's within our facility. Then there's an upload process into the it's basically a dashboard-based environment where they're going to have the source video put up, and then a standard on the number of renditions that are going to be put out. We tend to have a broad number of renditions aiming at traditional browser, smartphone, iOS, Android, and HTML5, and tablet. So we've come up with, I don't know what they are, but there's probably 5 to 8 different renditions that are going to be stored within the asset management environment that sits within either Brightcove or at Kaltura. It's actually integrated into a digital asset management environment that's not in the cloud, and so it points to that before it hits Akamai. Akamai is as it's out in the wild versus sort of in the ingestion side of things. Each brand, I suppose, has different distribution deals that they have. So some are going to push stuff out via MRSS or within XML. Some are going to have more unique integration, syndication paths that they use depending on what the end state is. So we have deals with people like Microsoft to do content with them. There's ad network integration, very traditional, mainly pre-roll, although we're trying to experiment with other forms of advertising, some sponsorship or player wrappers. I'm just going through it in my head as we go through. Analytics are part of each of the platforms, so we have a standard approach to that. It usually integrates with Omniture, so it comes up in the Omniture dashboard along with all the normal analytics for the core content versus just the encapsulated content that's part of the video. And metadata is important in every one of those, so there's metadata that's captured in each one of those. From a quality assurance standpoint, going back and making sure that stuff isn't missed and that we can learn from it the next time. I'm trying to think if I missed anything. That's most of it.
Did that?
I've got a question. You mentioned something about metadata. What role does that play, and how is that applied?
Metadata?
We have a question about the role of metadata in a video cloud workflow.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Also for Michael.
Okay. It's a way to, you can think of it as tagging. Semantic Web has a very structured way to produce metadata around content. Video is just one form of content. It's a camera, when you produce something, produces a systemic bit of metadata that says it was shot at this resolution, at this time stamp is probably the easiest ones to think about. So that's the systemic side. And then the creator may say, well, I was standing next to a river, so there's metadata that says there's a river shot, there's a sailboat in the river. These are all labels you can put on those things. Metadata is metadata. I'm having a hard time going deeper than that. I'd have to be real meta to go deeper on metadata.
Do we have
it's a way to structure content and
we have
contextualize it.
one last question for our panelists back there?
I just had a quick question to the metadata question. Do you run any automated OCR on the videos?
Okay, the question is about an automated system for capturing metadata.
We're not at this point. It's all just part of the there's an automated side, which is the systemic side, and then we're not doing it. I've seen systems, because I'm part of our venture group, we see startups that do some of this stuff. And there's been a number of companies out there, Virage is one that comes to mind, that sort of breaks down video and creates smaller elements within the video that you can point to. But we're not doing that actively in any of ours, because we don't have the content that warrants it at this point.
Finbar or Suze, did either of you want to touch that one?
About the OCR and
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Well, I'm going to wrap it up a few minutes early. These people will be here if you have specific questions and want to approach them. I want to give a round of applause to our panelists.